Preston Caldwell hadn't moved in 11 seconds. He stood behind a mahogany desk in his private study, a glass of bourbon untouched at his elbow, the antique clock on the shelf behind him ticking past 7:38 p.m. His knuckles had gone white around the edge of the desk. Across from him, a 13-year-old boy in a faded green work polo, dirt still on both knees from the garden beds, held his ground. His hands were trembling, but his voice had been steady. Every word precise, every fact delivered like a prescription label read aloud. He had just told a millionaire that his 8-year-old daughter could walk, that the woman sleeping upstairs, the woman Preston Caldwell had asked to be his wife, had been grinding pills into a pink smoothie every morning for 22 months. And Preston's eyes said he already believed it. But the boy had more to say, and the millionaire wasn't ready to hear it. Dirt on his knees. Pharmacy labels memorized like prayers. I'm Kane uncovers, and the boy you just met? He's about to do something that 6 doctors and $85 million couldn't. 6 weeks earlier, the worlds of Micah Dawson and Preston Caldwell existed on the same map, but in different centuries. Micah's world fit inside a narrow storefront at 412 Glendale Avenue, Dawson Family Pharmacy, wedged between a laundromat and a nail supply shop, 4 blocks from the Eastbrook housing project. The sign out front had a cracked letter. The bell over the door rang flat. 6 rows of metal shelving held the inventory, and the fluorescent tubes overhead buzzed at a frequency Micah had stopped noticing 2 years ago. He worked the counter after school, not as a cashier, as a sorter. His uncle Raymond, 58, handled the prescriptions. Reading glasses on a beaded chain, a pen always behind his left ear, a voice that could calm a customer mid-panic attack. But Raymond's hands were starting to shake. Early arthritis, he said, nothing to worry about. So Micah had taken over the physical work. Receiving shipments, shelving bottles, checking expiration dates, matching pills to labels. By 13, Micah could identify over 40 common medications by shape, color, and imprint. He knew that lisinopril 10 milligrams was a round yellow tablet stamped L on one side. He knew metformin 500 milligrams was an oblong white pill scored in the center. He knew that cyclobenzaprine 5 milligrams was small, round, butterscotch yellow, and stamped with a capital V. He didn't learn this from a textbook. He learned it the way farm kids learn soil, by handling it every day. His bedroom sat directly above the shop. At night, he fell asleep to the low hum of the refrigerated insulin case below his floor. Some mornings, he woke up to Raymond already counting pills downstairs, the tap, tap, tap of tablets hitting the counting tray, coming up through the thin boards like a metronome. The pharmacy's rent was $2,200 a month. They were 2 months behind. That was how Micah ended up at the Caldwell estate. Charlotte Youth Works placed him, $11.50 an hour, summer groundskeeping, 40 hours a week. His assignment, the Caldwell property on Laurel Ridge Drive. 14 acres behind a wrought iron gate. A limestone driveway 340 feet long, lined with crepe myrtles in full bloom. Preston Caldwell's world was 14 miles and a lifetime away. Caldwell Luxe Properties, 11 boutique hotels across the southeast, gross revenue north of $40 million a year. His personal net worth hovered around $85 million, a number his accountant confirmed every quarter, and Preston never mentioned in public. He was 54, built like a man who swam laps every morning and skipped dessert most nights. Silver at the temples, a handshake that closed deals. 3 years ago, his wife Eleanor died of a brain aneurysm in the hallway between the kitchen and the library. She was 49. One moment she was carrying a cup of tea. The next moment she was on the floor, and the tea was soaking into a Persian rug that cost more than Micah's entire apartment. Eleanor's death hollowed Preston out. He kept working. That was the only gear he had. But the house felt like a museum of a life that had ended mid-sentence. Then Celeste Warren arrived, a licensed practical nurse, hired to manage Lily's care when the girl started showing symptoms of what doctors called progressive neuromuscular degeneration. Celeste was 35, composed, attentive, and patient in the way that lonely, grieving men mistake for love. Within 8 months, she moved from caretaker to companion to fiancée. The wedding was set for late summer. Micah's first morning at the estate, he came through the service entrance at 7 a.m. sharp. Gail Hobson, the estate manager, met him at the garden shed. 61, silver hair pulled tight, clipboard in hand, reading glasses identical to Raymond's. She handed him a laminated task list. Mulch the east flower beds, trim the boxwood along the south wall, clean the pool filter housing by noon. Micah nodded and got to work. He didn't speak unless spoken to. He finished tasks early. He didn't take breaks longer than 10 minutes. Gail noticed. On the second day, she told him he was the first YouthWorks kid who hadn't asked for an extra break by noon. But what Micah noticed was something else entirely. At 7:12 that first morning, while kneeling beside the east beds, he glanced through a ground floor window. Inside, he saw a girl in a motorized wheelchair at a long breakfast table. She was small, maybe 8. Her hair was in a loose ponytail. Her eyes were half closed. A woman stood beside her, tall, poised, blonde hair pinned neatly. She set a glass of pink smoothie in front of the girl. The girl drank it slowly, her grip on the glass barely holding. The woman watched until the glass was empty, then took it away. The girl's head drooped. She looked like she was fighting sleep at 7 in the morning. Micah turned back to the mulch. He didn't think much of it. Not yet. 2 weeks in, Micah had mapped the estate the way he'd mapped the pharmacy shelves, by repetition and attention. He knew the groundskeeping routes. He knew the delivery schedule. Organic produce from Hartfield Market. 3 bags, every Tuesday and Friday. He knew that Preston Caldwell left for his Charlotte office at 6:30 a.m. and returned at 6:15 p.m., and that in between, the estate belonged to Celeste Warren. Celeste ran the household the way a stage manager runs a theater. Warm words, precise timing, absolute control. She greeted Micah every morning with a smile that said she appreciated him and didn't want him any closer. The yard staff shouldn't be in the main house unsupervised, she told Gail during the second week. It's a liability issue. Gail relayed the instruction without editorializing. Micah understood. He was the help. Help stays outside. It wasn't just Celeste. The 2 adult groundskeepers, both white, both in their 40s, treated Micah the way people treat furniture they didn't pick out. They talked past him, assigned him the heaviest lifting without asking, and referred to him only as the kid or the YouthWorks one. When Micah repaired a drip irrigation joint that had been leaking for 2 weeks, a fix that took him 9 minutes and a 60-cent rubber washer, neither of them acknowledged it. The next morning, the senior groundskeeper told Gail that the line must have fixed itself. Micah didn't correct him. He replaced a second washer on the south line the following day and said nothing about that one either. Inside the house, the invisibility was different. It was polite. It was careful. Celeste would say, "Thank you so much," when he carried things, her voice pitched perfectly between warmth and distance. Close enough to seem kind, far enough to remind him where the line was. She never said anything cruel. She never had to. The architecture of the relationship said it for her. But Gail also recognized efficiency. When Micah finished his outdoor tasks early, she started assigning him indoor errands, carrying in the Hartfield grocery bags, organizing the garage storage room, hauling recycling bins. These errands brought him through the kitchen, and the kitchen was where Micah saw 2 things that snagged in his brain like fishhooks. The first was a small white ceramic mortar and pestle sitting on a shelf behind the kitchen island. It was out of place. The kitchen was modern, quartz countertops, a built-in espresso machine, a 6-burner range. The mortar was old-fashioned, almost clinical, and it had a faint residue inside, a yellowish dust, barely visible. Micah knew that color. The second thing was a pattern. The part-time cook, setting up for lunch, mentioned it casually while Micah stacked cans in the pantry. "Ms. Warren makes Lily's smoothie herself every morning. Won't let anyone else touch it. She's very particular about Lily's diet." Particular, that was the word she used. Micah started watching Lily more carefully. Not intrusively, just through the windows and hallways that his errands took him past. What he saw didn't make sense. Mornings were bad. At 7:15, after the smoothie, Lily's speech slurred. Her eyelids drooped. Her grip on a crayon or a cup was so weak it would slip from her fingers. She looked sedated. But afternoons told a different story. By noon, she was slightly more alert. By 2 o'clock, her voice was clearer. By 4, she could turn pages of a book with both hands. By 5, Micah once saw her roll her wheelchair across the library on her own, arms working, posture upright, like a different child. Micah had overheard enough to know Lily's diagnosis: progressive neuromuscular degeneration. 6 specialists in 22 months. No clear cause. No effective treatment. But progressive conditions don't take lunch breaks. They don't get better at 4 p.m. and worse at 8 a.m. That's not how nerve damage works. That's not how any real disease works. That's how a drug works. A drug that peaks in the morning and wears off by afternoon. That evening, back at the pharmacy, Micah was shelving a new shipment. His hand closed around a bottle of cyclobenzaprine 5 milligrams. Small, round, butterscotch yellow tablets with a V stamp. He stared at the bottle. He thought about the mortar, the residue, the color. He put the bottle on the shelf, label facing out, exactly 1 inch from the edge. His hands were steady. His stomach was not. He recognized the residue. He just didn't want to believe it. On a Tuesday morning in the 3rd week, Micah arrived at the estate 20 minutes early. 6:40 a.m. instead of 7. He told himself it was because the bus ran ahead of schedule. That was a lie. He positioned himself at the East Garden beds, the same beds he'd worked his first day. They faced the kitchen's bay window. Clear sightline, 28 feet. He knelt. He pulled weeds, and he watched. At 6:14 a.m., Celeste Warren entered the kitchen. She wore a gray silk robe, her hair still in a sleep braid. She moved with the efficiency of someone performing a task she'd done 1,000 times. She opened a cabinet above the refrigerator. A high cabinet, not the kind used for daily cooking. She removed a small amber prescription bottle. She tapped it twice against her palm. 2 tablets fell into the ceramic mortar. She ground them. 8 to 10 rotations, practiced and precise. The pestle moved in small circles, crushing the tablets into fine powder. She scraped the powder into a blender cup already loaded with frozen strawberries, a banana, and a spoonful of vanilla yogurt. She pressed blend. 15 seconds. She poured the contents into a pink glass, Lily's glass, the one with a silicone grip ring. Then she rinsed the mortar under running water, dried it with a dish towel, and returned it to the shelf behind the island. 3 minutes and 40 seconds, start to finish. Micah's heart was hammering so hard he could feel it in his teeth. His hands gripped the garden shears until the knuckle skin lightened. He forced himself to clip 3 boxwood branches. The cuts were uneven, the first imperfect cuts he'd made all summer. He spent the rest of the day building a timeline, using the Notes app on his cracked screen phone, an old model, no data plan, Wi-Fi only. He logged timestamps against Lily's visible condition. He couldn't get close enough to take vitals, but he could observe what anyone could observe if they were paying attention. 7:15 a.m. Lily drinks the smoothie, eyes half closed within 10 minutes, speech slurred. Weak grip on her breakfast spoon. 9:30 a.m. Lily on the terrace in her wheelchair, head tilted to one side. She's trying to hold a crayon. It keeps slipping. 12 p.m. Micah delivers pool supplies near the terrace. Lily is sitting slightly straighter. She says, "Thank you," when he passes. The words are clear. 3:45 p.m. Through the library window, Lily is turning pages of a picture book. Both hands. Controlled movements. 5 p.m. Micah passes the hallway. Lily is rolling her wheelchair under her own power for the first time he's ever seen. Her arms push the wheels in smooth, deliberate strokes. 5 observations. 1 day. A curve that started in sedation and ended in function. That night, at the pharmacy's desktop computer, a beige tower so old it still had a CD drive, Micah looked up cyclobenzaprine. He read the clinical profile the way he read every prescription label. Slowly, completely, word by word. Onset of action, 30 to 60 minutes. Peak plasma concentration, 1 to 2 hours. Duration of effect, 4 to 6 hours. Primary effects, drowsiness, muscle relaxation, reduced motor control. Common side effects, blurred vision, dry mouth, dizziness. He pulled out his phone notes. He overlaid the drug's pharmacokinetic curve onto Lily's symptom timeline. Smoothie consumed at 7:15 a.m. Onset at 7:45. Peak sedation at 8:15 to 9:15. Effects diminishing by 11 to noon. Largely clear by 1 to 2 p.m. The match was exact. Not approximate. Exact. Micah sat in the pharmacy's back room for a long time. The insulin case hummed below him. A streetlight buzzed outside the barred window. He was 13 years old, and he was holding a theory that, if true, meant a woman was systematically poisoning a child, and that 6 doctors in 22 months had missed it because they were looking for a disease, not a drug. He needed to be sure. He needed to hear it from someone who would know. He found Uncle Raymond in the front, locking the register. Uncle Ray, hypothetical, school project. Raymond looked up. If someone was getting a muscle relaxant every day, say cyclobenzaprine, and they didn't need it, what would happen over time? Raymond set the register key down. Chronic administration? Prolonged muscle weakness, possible atrophy, cognitive fog, dependence. In a child? He paused. You'd see something that looks a lot like a neurological disorder. Doctors might chase it for months before they thought to test for it. Why? School project. Raymond didn't push, but his eyes lingered on Micah for 3 seconds longer than normal. Micah went upstairs. He sat on his bed. He looked at his phone, the 5 timestamps glowing on a cracked screen, battery at 12%. The drug wore off every afternoon. That meant Lily's legs still worked. To understand why Micah Dawson saw what 6 specialists missed, you have to understand Helen Dawson. Helen was Raymond's mother and Micah's grandmother. She worked as a nurse's aide for 31 years at 3 different care facilities in Charlotte. She never became a registered nurse. She couldn't afford the schooling, but she knew more about medications than most people with degrees. She knew because she administered them, day after day, year after year, to patients who depended on her hands and her precision. When Micah was 9, Helen started teaching him. Not formally, not with textbooks. She'd sit on the edge of her bed in the evenings and open her weekly pill organizer, the kind with 14 compartments, morning and evening for each day, and have him read the labels aloud. Metoprolol, 25 milligrams, morning. Lisinopril, 10 milligrams, morning. Cyclobenzaprine, 5 milligrams, as needed for back spasms. He learned the names the way other kids learned batting averages. He learned the dosages the way other kids learned song lyrics. And Helen repeated one rule until it was carved into his memory like letters in stone. You read the bottle, baby. You don't trust what someone tells you. You read the bottle. When Micah's mother, Denise, was diagnosed with ovarian cancer at 32, it was Micah, then 10 years old, who managed her at-home medication schedule. 6 prescriptions, 4 times daily. He built a system out of a tackle box from the dollar store. Compartments labeled with masking tape and marker, color-coded by time of day. He never missed a dose, not once in 14 months. Denise died at 34. Micah was 11. He didn't cry at the funeral. He organized the leftover medications instead, returning unopened bottles to the pharmacy, sorting the partially used ones for proper disposal, labeling each bag with the drug name and remaining count. Raymond watched him do it and didn't say a word. There was nothing to say. The boy was doing what he knew, what he'd been taught. Helen held everything together for another year and a half. Then her heart failed. Not dramatically, just slowly, quietly, the way tired hearts do. She passed in her sleep, in the apartment above the pharmacy, 14 months before this story begins. The last thing Micah had done for her that evening was crush a cyclobenzaprine tablet and stir it into a spoonful of applesauce. She'd squeezed his wrist and said, "Good hands, baby. You've got good hands." Micah kept one thing of hers, A laminated index card, 3 inches by 5 inches, yellowed at the edges. On it, in Helen's handwriting, blue ballpoint ink, neat capital letters, were her 8 daily medications, listed with dosages and times. He kept it behind his phone case. He touched it when he was unsure of himself. He touched it more often than he'd admit. And this is why the mortar mattered. Cyclobenzaprine for back spasms. Helen took it 3 times a week during her last year. The tablets were hard for her to swallow. Her throat muscles had weakened, so Micah crushed them for her. He used a spoon and a small ceramic dish. He pressed and turned, until the tablet became a fine butterscotch powder with a sweet, bitter smell that clung to his fingers even after washing. He knew that smell because he'd made it 100 times. For her. He crushed pills for love once. Now he recognized them used as poison. I gotta stop here for a second. Because that last line, it's gonna slide right past you if I let it. This 13-year-old kid recognized a drug that 6 board-certified specialists missed. And the reason he recognized it? Because he used to grind it into applesauce for a woman who couldn't swallow anymore. His grandmother. His dying grandmother. That's not textbook knowledge. That's not even street smarts. That's the kind of knowing you get from sitting beside someone you love while they leave. And it just saved a little girl's legs. By the end of week 4, Micah had 8 days of time-stamped symptom logs on his phone. He had identified the drug, the delivery method, the timing, and the pattern. He had a pharmacokinetic model that matched Lily's daily arc with clinical precision. What he didn't have was standing. He was 13. He was the yard boy. He made $11.50 an hour through a city youth program. If he walked into a police station and accused a wealthy white woman of poisoning her fiancé's child, they would call his uncle. If he told Gail, Gail reported to Celeste on household matters. If he told the cook would tell Gail. Every path looped back to the same wall. Except one. Preston Caldwell came home every evening at 6:15 p.m. and went to his study for 30 minutes before dinner. That was the only window. 30 minutes, one closed door, no intermediary. On Thursday of the 4th week, Micah asked Gail for permission to report a maintenance concern about the pool filtration system directly to Mr. Caldwell. The pool was Preston's personal project. He swam laps every morning before Celeste was awake. And Gail knew he'd want to hear about it. She hesitated. Then she nodded. At 7:30 p.m., Micah knocked on the study door. Preston opened it. He was in a loosened navy tie, shirt sleeves rolled to the forearms, reading glasses pushed up into his hair. He expected a 2-minute conversation about chlorine levels. "Come in. What's the issue with the filter?" Micah stepped inside. He closed the door behind him. The study was paneled in dark wood, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves on 2 walls, a framed photograph of Eleanor Caldwell on the desk beside an untouched glass of bourbon. The antique clock read 7:32. "There's no issue with the filter, Mr. Caldwell." Preston's brow moved a fraction. He took off his reading glasses. "Then why are you here?" "Your daughter, Lily." The room got very still. Micah didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush. He spoke the way his grandmother had taught him to read labels. Slowly, completely, word by word. He organized what he had to say into 3 parts, because that's how the pharmacy organized prescriptions: the what, the how, and the why. Part 1. The pattern. "Mr. Caldwell, your daughter is worse in the mornings and better by the evening. Every single day. I've watched her for 8 days. At 7:15 a.m., after her smoothie, she can barely hold a spoon. By noon, she can grip a crayon. By 4 p.m., she can turn pages with both hands. By 5, she rolls her own wheelchair." He paused. "Progressive neuromuscular degeneration doesn't work that way. A real neurological condition doesn't improve on a daily schedule. It doesn't wear off by lunchtime." Preston stared at him. His lips parted, but he didn't speak. Part 2. The method. "Ms. Warren makes Lily's smoothie every morning at 6:14 a.m. She uses a ceramic mortar and pestle that she keeps on a shelf behind the kitchen island. She takes an amber prescription bottle from the cabinet above the refrigerator, the high one, on the left side. She taps out 2 tablets. She grinds them, 8 to 10 rotations. She scrapes the powder into the blender with the fruit and yogurt. She blends, pours, rinses the mortar, and puts it back. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. I've watched her do it 3 times. Preston's hand found the edge of the desk. He gripped it. "Who put you up to this?" "Nobody, sir." "Get out of my house." The tablets are butterscotch yellow, small and round. They have a capital V stamped on one side. Preston stopped, his jaw locked. Something in the specificity, the color, the shape, the letter, hit him differently than an accusation would. Accusations are emotional. Details are clinical. And clinical details from a 13-year-old in a garden polo don't sound like a lie. They sound like evidence. He looked at Micah, really looked, for the first time since the boy had started working on his property. He saw the tucked-in polo, the careful posture, the hands that were shaking at the sides but hadn't shaken while speaking. He saw a kid who was terrified of being in this room, but had walked in anyway. Part 3. The drug. "That's cyclobenzaprine, Mr. Caldwell. 5 milligrams per tablet. She gives Lily 2 tablets, so 10 milligrams, every morning. It's a muscle relaxant. Onset is 30 to 60 minutes. Peak effect at 1 to 2 hours. It wears off in 4 to 6. Micah pulled out his phone. He showed Preston the Notes app, 8 days of timestamps, each one logged with Lily's observed condition. Mornings, middays, afternoons, a pattern so consistent you could set a clock by it. He set the phone on the desk, screen up. At 10 milligrams a day for 22 months, cyclobenzaprine would cause exactly what Lily has: progressive muscle weakness, drowsiness, slurred speech, reduced motor control. A doctor looking for a neurological disease would chase the wrong diagnosis, because the symptoms look the same. He paused again, longer this time. But it's reversible. If you skip the smoothie tomorrow morning and give Lily a normal breakfast instead, her legs will start responding by noon, maybe sooner. Preston looked at the phone on his desk. He scrolled through the entries. 8 days, 40 observations, each one time-stamped to the minute. He looked at the framed photograph of Eleanor, the last person who had looked after Lily without an agenda, and his expression changed. The anger was still there, but something else was forming beneath it, something heavier. "Why should I believe you? You're a kid. You cut my hedges." Micah reached into his back pocket. He pulled out a laminated index card, 3x5, yellowed, blue ink, neat capital letters. He set it on the desk next to the phone. "My grandmother, Helen Dawson. She was a nurse's aide for 31 years. She took cyclobenzaprine for her back, 5 milligrams as needed. I crushed it for her every night because she couldn't swallow the tablets. I know what it smells like. I know what it tastes like. I know what it does." He pointed to the card. Line 6. Cyclobenzaprine 5 milligrams. PRN back spasms. "Your daughter doesn't need a wheelchair, Mr. Caldwell. She needs someone to stop putting that powder in her breakfast." The study was silent except for the clock. 7 seconds passed. 8. 9. Then Preston Caldwell sat down. Not in his desk chair, on the leather ottoman by the window. It put him at Micah's eye level. For the first time in 4 weeks, the millionaire and the yard boy were looking at each other straight on. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want?" "Nothing, sir. I make $11.50 an hour. I don't get anything from this." "Then why?" Micah's voice softened, but it didn't waver. "Because your daughter smiles bigger at 4 p.m. than she does at 8 a.m., and nobody in this house has asked why." Preston pressed his palms against his face. He held them there for a long time. When he lowered them, his eyes were red. He didn't call the police. He didn't confront Celeste. He looked at Micah and said 5 words. "Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Micah nodded. He picked up his phone and his grandmother's card. He turned toward the door. "Micah," he stopped. "If you're right..." Preston's voice cracked on the word. He couldn't finish the sentence. Micah said it for him, quietly. "Then your daughter can walk, sir." Tomorrow, at 6. If the boy was right, everything Preston loved was a lie. At 10:15 that night, Preston Caldwell lay in bed beside Celeste Warren and did not close his eyes. She was turned away from him, breathing softly, one hand tucked under her pillow the way she always slept. He had watched her sleep 1,000 times and found it peaceful. Now the sound of her breathing made his skin crawl. Under the covers, he opened his phone. He typed cyclobenzaprine, 5 milligrams, side effects children, into the search bar, and read the results with the screen brightness turned down to its lowest setting. Drowsiness, muscle weakness, impaired motor function. In pediatric patients, chronic use may mimic neurological conditions. His hands were shaking. He clicked the phone off. Celeste stirred beside him. "You're tense," she murmured. "Is it the Henderson deal?" Preston forced his voice flat. "Yeah, numbers aren't right." She rubbed his shoulder. "You work too hard." Then she rolled over and was still again. He lay there until 4 a.m. He didn't sleep for a single minute. Meanwhile, 4 miles south, Micah Dawson wasn't sleeping either. He sat cross-legged on his bed, his phone plugged into a charging cable that only worked at a certain angle, rereading his symptom log. Entry by entry, timestamp by timestamp. At 11:30 p.m., he texted his uncle, who was still awake watching a baseball game on the pharmacy's small television. "Can cyclobenzaprine show up in a basic blood panel?" 3 dots. Then Raymond's reply. "Not standard. You'd need to request it specifically. Enzyme immunoassay or mass spec." Why? Still that school project. Raymond didn't respond. Micah imagined him staring at the phone, deciding whether to push. The 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. No follow-up came. At 5:48 a.m., Micah arrived at the estate's service gate. The morning was cool, 61 degrees, mist sitting low in the crepe myrtles. Preston was already there, standing in the shadow of the stone pillar. He wore jeans, a gray baseball cap, and a wrinkled field jacket. He looked like he'd aged 5 years overnight. They didn't speak. Preston led Micah along the hedgerow on the east side of the property to a spot 22 feet from the kitchen bay window. The boxwood was thick enough to conceal them. The sightline was clear. They waited. At 6:05 a.m., a light came on in the kitchen. Celeste appeared. She was already dressed. Cream blouse, linen trousers, hair pinned. She picked up her phone and made a call. The kitchen window was cracked 2 inches. The voices carried. Fragments. Just fragments, but enough. "The transfer paperwork is ready." Greenfield confirmed the room. "I told him next Friday works better." "She'll adjust." Preston's body went rigid beside Micah. Greenfield. He knew the name. Celeste had mentioned it twice in the last month. "A residential care facility," she said, "with excellent neurological support." She'd framed it as an option, a conversation for later. But this phone call wasn't a conversation. It was a confirmation. A room. A date. Next Friday. Greenfield Residential Care was 120 miles from Charlotte. If Lily was transferred there, Celeste would be listed as her primary caretaker. Preston would visit on weekends, if that. And once the wedding was official, 9 days away, Celeste would hold medical power of attorney under a clause in the prenuptial agreement that neither Preston nor his lawyers had scrutinized closely enough. Medical power of attorney over a child classified as permanently disabled. Access to a trust fund Eleanor Caldwell had established before her death. $12 million, held in Lily's name, managed by her legal guardian. That was the architecture. Not just cruelty, strategy. 22 months of drugging, 6 medical dead ends, a wedding, a transfer, and a clause. At 6:14 a.m., Celeste set the phone down. She opened the cabinet above the refrigerator. She removed the amber bottle. She tapped. She ground. She blended. She poured. She rinsed. She dried. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Preston watched every second. He turned to Micah. He didn't speak. His jaw was clenched so tight that the muscles in his neck stood out like cables. Micah whispered, "The smoothie's on the counter. She'll take it to Lily in about 2 minutes." Preston closed his eyes. When he opened them, something had changed. The doubt was gone. What remained was worse. The smoothie was on the counter. Lily was coming down the stairs. At 6:22 a.m., Preston Caldwell walked into his own kitchen. Celeste looked up. Surprise flickered across her face. A half-second adjustment, then a smile. "You're up early. Couldn't sleep?" "I want to have breakfast with Lily this morning." He walked to the counter. He looked at the pink smoothie in the grip ring glass. "I'll make her a fresh one. I want to try that new protein powder." Celeste's smile held. "That's sweet, but I already made it. Her usual. She likes the strawberry." Preston picked up the glass. He carried it to the sink. He turned it upside down and let the pink liquid spiral down the drain. He watched it go. Then he set the empty glass on the counter and looked at Celeste. Her smile was still in place, but her left hand, resting against her thigh, closed into a fist. "I'll make eggs," Preston said. "She likes scrambled, right?" "Of course." Celeste's voice was light. Perfect pitch. "I'll go get her up." "I'll get her. You take the morning off." Another half-second pause, then, "Sure, I'll be in the study if you need me." She left the kitchen. Her footsteps on the hardwood were even, measured, unhurried. The footsteps of someone who hadn't decided yet whether to be concerned. Preston made scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice, no smoothie. Lily arrived in her wheelchair at 7 a.m., pushed by Preston himself. She looked up at him, confused but happy. "Daddy, why are you home? Is it Saturday?" "Just wanted to see you this morning, sweetheart." They ate together. Preston watched her the way Micah had taught him to watch. Not with a father's wishful eye, but with a pharmacist's clinical one. At 7 a.m., Lily's speech was clear. Her eyes were open, focused, tracking. She held her fork in a steady grip and cut her toast without help. She had never done that after a smoothie morning. Not once in 22 months. At 8:30, Preston sat with Lily in the library. She colored. Her grip on the crayon was firm. She pressed hard enough to leave deep strokes of green and blue on the paper. He thought about every other morning, every crayon that slipped, every time Celeste had said, "She's having a bad motor day." At 9:45 a.m., Lily stopped coloring. She looked down at her legs with an expression Preston would remember for the rest of his life. "Daddy, my legs feel funny." His throat tightened. "Funny how?" "Tingly, like fizzy water." Sensation. She was feeling sensation in legs that hadn't reported anything in months. Preston called Dr. Nora Bennett at 9:50 a.m., not Lily's regular doctor. That doctor had been recommended by Celeste. Dr. Bennett was a private physician Preston's business partner had used. She arrived at 10:30. She performed a basic neurological exam in the sunroom. Reflexes, present. Patellar response, weak but measurable. Muscle tone in the lower extremities, reduced but not absent. She pressed a blunt pin against the sole of Lily's right foot. Lily pulled away. "She felt that," Dr. Bennett said quietly. "That's a voluntary motor response." She ordered an immediate blood draw, specifically requesting a comprehensive toxicology panel including cyclobenzaprine and benzodiazepine metabolites. The samples were sent to a lab with an expedited turnaround. At 11:40 a.m., Lily was sitting in her wheelchair in the sunroom. Warm light from the bay windows fell across her lap. She was looking at a picture book. Then she looked down at her feet. Her right big toe moved, then her left. She stared at them like she was meeting strangers. Then she looked up at Preston with eyes so wide they seemed to hold the entire room. "Daddy! Daddy, look!" Preston dropped to his knees in front of the wheelchair. He took her feet in his hands. He felt her toes curl against his palms. Tiny movements. Muscles that had been chemically silenced for 22 months, waking up one fiber at a time. He pressed his forehead against her knees and couldn't speak. Outside in the garden, Micah Dawson was pulling weeds by the sunroom windows. He saw the toes move. He saw Preston's shoulders shake. He didn't celebrate. He closed his eyes, and his right hand moved to his back pocket, pressing the laminated card through the denim. At 12:15 p.m., Preston asked Celeste to come to the study. Dr. Bennett was present. The door was closed. Preston walked to the kitchen. He opened the cabinet above the refrigerator, the high one, left side. Inside, he found 3 items. 1. An amber prescription bottle. The pharmacy label was partially scratched off, but a fragment of the original sticker remained, enough to show a pharmacy name and a partial prescription number. 2. A second bottle, alprazolam, 0.25 milligrams, a benzodiazepine. The label on this one was intact. 3. A folded sheet of paper in Celeste's handwriting, a dosing schedule, Monday through Friday, 2 cyclobenzaprine plus 1 alprazolam. Weekends, 1 cyclobenzaprine only. Weekends, 1 pill instead of 2. Because Preston was home on weekends. Because he might notice if the sedation was too heavy. Every Saturday, when Lily seemed a little better, every time Preston had mentioned it to her doctors and they'd attributed it to rest, it was just a lower dose. A calibrated performance. 22 months of it. Dr. Bennett photographed everything. The bottles, the dosing schedule, the mortar with its faint residue. Celeste stood in the center of the study. She didn't crumble. She didn't cry. Her voice went flat and cold, like a thermostat clicking off. You have no idea what you're doing. She needs me. You all need me. Then, I want my lawyer. Police arrived at 1:10 p.m. Detective from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg PD, Celeste, was arrested at 2:35 p.m. She walked to the patrol car without resistance, her chin raised, her eyes forward. The expedited blood panel came back at 4:30 p.m. Cyclobenzaprine concentration, 45 nanograms per milliliter. Therapeutic range for an adult, 10 to 30. Lily weighed 52 pounds. She was 8 years old. The concentration in her blood was dangerous by any standard. Alprazolam metabolites were also detected. Lily's toes moved at 11:40. By 2:35, Celeste was in handcuffs. In the first 72 hours after the last smoothie, Lily Caldwell's body began remembering. Day 1. The tingling spread from her toes to her ankles. She described it as sparkly. She flexed her feet under the blanket and laughed when the blanket moved. Day 3. She gripped Preston's hand across the breakfast table. She squeezed hard enough to leave finger marks on his skin. He didn't pull away. He didn't want to. Day 8. A physical therapist placed a child-sized walker in front of Lily in the sunroom. The same bay windows, the same warm light. Lily gripped the handles. She pulled herself upright. Her legs shook. Her knees buckled once, then locked. She stood for 26 seconds. Then she sat back down, breathing hard, grinning like she'd just run a marathon. Day 21. She walked. 6 steps, unassisted, across the sunroom floor, from the wheelchair to the window seat where Preston sat waiting. Her gait was uneven, her balance uncertain, the steps of someone learning a language her body had been forced to forget. But her feet hit the floor. Left, right, left, right, left, right. 6 steps. 22 months dissolved in 6 steps. Physical therapy would continue 3 times a week at Mercy Regional. Full recovery was expected within 4 to 6 months. The muscles would rebuild. The neural pathways would reconnect. She was 8. Children heal. That was the one mercy in all of it. She was young enough to get it all back. Celeste Warren was charged with aggravated child abuse, unlawful administration of a controlled substance to a minor, and fraud. During the investigation, her background surfaced in full. Her nursing license had been suspended in Virginia 4 years earlier. The reason? Medication discrepancies involving an elderly patient at a home health agency. The discrepancies were for cyclobenzaprine. The patient had developed unexplained muscle weakness. The case had been settled quietly, and Celeste had moved to North Carolina. A pattern. The same drug. The same method. A different victim. Preston Caldwell sat alone in his study the night of the arrest. The same desk. The same chair. The bourbon glass this time was empty. He stared at Eleanor's photograph and made a list of every sign he'd missed. Lily's good days and bad days. The smoothie Celeste never let anyone else make. The cabinet he never opened. The wedding he was 9 days from completing. He didn't forgive himself that night. He might never. But he decided that guilt without action was just self-pity in a suit, and he'd wasted enough time on things that felt comfortable. 10 days later, he asked Micah to come to the study again. This time, Micah sat in the leather chair, not standing, not at the door. Preston had set a glass of lemonade on the side table, the kind of gesture that costs nothing but says everything about who the glass is for. Preston leaned forward with his hands folded. "I've spoken to your Uncle Raymond. I'd like to fund your education. Full scholarship, high school through college. Pre-pharmacy track if that's what you choose. Tuition, books, housing, and a monthly stipend." Micah looked at him. His expression didn't change. "I don't need charity, Mr. Caldwell. This isn't charity. This is a debt. You gave my daughter her legs back. I owe you more than I can calculate, and I'm a man who calculates everything." Micah was quiet for a moment. Then, "Can you also help my uncle with the pharmacy rent? He's 2 months behind." Preston smiled. It was the first real smile anyone had seen from him in weeks. "I already did. Paid through the end of the year. 12 months at $2,200. A certified check for $26,400 delivered to Raymond Dawson at 412 Glendale Avenue 2 days earlier." When Raymond called Micah that evening, his voice cracked on the first word. "Boy, what did you do?" Micah was sitting on his bed, the phone cradled against his shoulder, his grandmother's card in his hand. "I read the bottle, Uncle Ray, just like she taught me." 2 weeks later, a hand-drawn card arrived at the pharmacy. No return address, but the estate's zip code was on the envelope. Inside, a piece of construction paper, a stick figure in a green shirt standing next to a smaller figure with a ponytail and 2 visible legs. Not a wheelchair. Below the drawing, in wobbly 8-year-old handwriting, "Thank you for making my legs remember." Micah put the card on the shelf behind the pharmacy counter, next to Helen's photograph. And there was one more thing. Dr. Nora Bennett, impressed by the precision of Micah's observations, contacted Raymond with a proposal. She wanted to offer Micah a junior volunteer position at Mercy Regional's pharmacy department, supervised, part-time, educational. A first step on a path that could lead to pharmacology, toxicology, or clinical research. Raymond asked Micah if he was interested. Micah said yes before the question was finished. She walked 6 steps. He kept his grandmother's card in his pocket. So here's the thing this story doesn't say out loud. And I think it should. What Celeste did? It has a clinical name. It's called factitious disorder imposed on another. Used to be called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. A caregiver deliberately makes someone sick to keep control, keep attention, keep access. And it happens way more than you'd think. Studies estimate 6 to 9% of identified cases end in the child's death. 6 to 9%. And the average time to diagnosis? Over 21 months. Because the symptoms look real, the caregiver looks devoted, and nobody thinks to test for the drug that's already sitting in the kitchen. Micah didn't know the clinical term. He just knew the pill. Sometimes that's enough. The following Monday, Micah Dawson arrived at Mercy Regional Medical Center at 7 a.m. He walked through the main entrance, not the service entrance, not the side door, not the delivery bay, the main entrance. A volunteer coordinator handed him a white lab coat. It was 2 sizes too big. The sleeves hung past his knuckles. He rolled them up, twice on each side, and tucked them neat. He checked his reflection in the glass door of a supply cabinet, green polo underneath, white coat on top, the laminated card in his back pocket, where it always was. His first assignment was the dispensary intake shelf. 62 bottles, arriving from the overnight shipment, each one needing to be verified against the order manifest. Medication name, dosage, NDC number, expiration date, lot number. He picked up the first bottle. He read the label. He checked the manifest. He placed it on the shelf, label facing out, exactly 1 inch from the edge. Same hands, same precision. New coat. Helen Dawson never met Lily Caldwell. She never saw the estate on Laurel Ridge Drive, or the mortar on the kitchen shelf, or the pink smoothie that hid a crime. But her voice read the bottle, baby, walked across that sunroom floor in a little girl's unsteady steps. Some knowledge doesn't come from classrooms. It comes from kitchens and bedsides and cracked linoleum floors. It comes from loss. It comes from love. And sometimes, in the right hands, it comes just in time. Micah read the second label, then the third. He didn't need anyone to believe in him. He believed in what he knew. If this story reminded you that the people who see the most are often the ones the world looks past, a subscribe and a like help us keep telling these kinds of stories. Share it with someone who needs to hear that what they know matters.